All right, Security Plus Lab 12, configuring a system for audit policy. Basically, be working a lot in Group Policy Editor. So our only virtual machine here is DC1. We're going to open DC1 here, log in, and then we're going to configure audit policies, mostly in Windows. There's a separate lab for doing this in Linux. So now we're going to navigate to our lab files, and we're going to sysinternals. And we have a file in here, PROCEXP. So these are in order, alphabetically. Find this PROCEXP. I recommend using pick the one that's 64. I recommend clicking on the scroll bar and moving it that way rather than use your mouse wheel. Right click on that, run as administrator. We're going to hit yes here. And that's going to open up this Process Explorer application. Now what this is showing us, these are showing us all the applications that are running right now. We can scroll through here. We use this in another lab as well. We have the number of bytes, CPU usage, usually as some sort of representation here. We have a process ID. Every Windows process is going to have a process ID and a little description for each of these processes. I was just throwing it back there for a moment at the high CPU usage. Let's see here. And that's exactly what this should look like. Close the Process Explorer window. Why are we closing this? I'm just going to minimize this because I imagine we're going to use it later. I don't know why it would have us open it if we're just going to close it right away. Okay. One of the key points to understand is that any malware that gets executed on this machine will run with at least the privilege of a logged on user. And the current user is the main administrator. Yeah, so basically what I guess this is trying to drive at is, since we're in the administrator account, if there's any malware that affects the administrator account or the machine that the administrator logs into, then that malware is going to be running at administrative privileges, which is obviously not ideal. All right, so from here we can find PowerShell, or we can click in the Start button. I like to just search for it, because then we have the option to right-click. I'm going to right-click and run as administrator. You always want to run PowerShell as an administrator. Some labs it's not necessary. Most labs it is, so it's better just to do this. All right, now we can type in PowerShell task list. The task list command is going to give us a list of all these tasks, just like that. So we see basically the same information that we saw in our Process Explorer. This has obviously a lot more information, but the task list is just a good, quick way to see what tasks are running. You have a process ID, memory usage, and then the name of the task itself. So a pretty decent, quick way to do this. Okay, then we could do a special file. We can export this task list if we want using PowerShell. Task list space / SVC space / FI space, put in quotation marks, status, EQ, running. Basically what we're doing is we're filtering this to show our running processes. Then we're going to select a place to save this file. So we're going to save that in C:/services-running.txt. Okay, so we should have saved or created a file there. Let's take a look at the score, see if we did that correctly. And we did. So we have it. If we go and explore for it, see services running, here it is. Here's that text file. We could open that up and we can see the running services right now, which is a very simple way to export your running services. Great. So that's basically how we check what processes are running. Now we're going to be working in Server Manager. So we're going to go to Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers. And we're going to be working with the Bobby account. The good old Bobby account worked in these labs. So let's go ahead and select the Bobby account. Bobby account is going to be in the user container. Click on that container. We see Bobby there. We're going to right click on Bobby. And we're adding Bobby to a group. We're type sales. Check names. We find the sales group. We're going to hit OK. And hit OK. That was added successfully. Now we're going to check here, see if Bobby's in the sales group. And he will be, because we did it right. Fantastic. Okay. So now we're going to go back to File Explorer. We're going to go to this PC. I'm going to right-click the C drive. And I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to create a folder in the C drive. It's not really... We want to right-click in C, and then we have to create a new folder. We're going to name this Data 1. Really should say get into the C drive first. Okay, select Data 1. Right-click this. We're going to enter Data 1, new text document. We're going to call this File A with a capital A. Now in Data 1, we're going to go back to the C file. We're going to right click on Data 1. And we're going to go to Properties. And we're going to select Security here. And we're going to edit the permissions of this file. So we're going to select Add for Add Permissions. And we need to, which permissions are we adding here? Select the security tab, figure the NTFS permissions, edit button, the permissions for Data 1 dialog, click the add. Yeah, so we're going to hit edit here. Then we're going to add a group or a username. And basically what we're doing here is we're adding that sales group that we had before. We had Bobby added to that sales group, so now we're adding the sales group as an owner for this folder. Okay. Now this is having some trouble, and we don't see anything about that in the instructions. This is probably one of these examples of when the lab goes off of what the instructions really say to do. So we're having some problems here. It's setting the security information. The idea here is that we're creating a folder with a file in it. Yeah, that's fine. And we're assigning that permissions that folder to Bobby. So ideally, Bobby should have access to that folder. All right, so if we were able to right click, let's see. First off, let's make sure that Bobby's able, or the sales group is able to modify. So we should allow permissions to modify. We'll basically give full control to the folder. It really should tell you that you have to click OK through all of those dialog boxes. Looks like we did it successfully, even though we had a lot of dialog boxes telling us this is going to change permissions for these root settings. That's fine. So ideally now Bobby has access, and we see full access there. Does the cell group have modified permission to file text A? Well, let's go right-click Properties on File A, go to Security, select Sales, and we see that Bobby, or the sales group with Bobby, is able to do everything that we want there. Give full control. So yes. And that's because what we've done here is we've changed permissions to the folder. Okay, since we changed permission to the folder, anything contained in that folder is going to be affected by those privilege changes. So that's how this example works. And that's how the Windows file system works. New technology file system. You have folders and anything, the contents of that folder. If you have permissions from a certain folder, any of the contents of the folder inherit the permissions. They inherit the permissions of the folder itself. All right, now that's asking us right here, what causes the permissions to be configured this way on file a.txt? And that's because it's not the first one. The parent object, the settings or the permissions of the parent object were automatically inherited by file A child object. That's correct. All right, so fantastic. All right, in File Explorer, right-click on C Data 1 folder, select Properties, Security tab, Advanced. Okay. As soon as it stops lagging, we'll do that. Right-click, Properties, Security, Advanced. This is where you can set your advanced privileges. And here we see kind of a detailed list of what we saw before. Select Effective Access tab. In the select a user interface, we can type Bobby. So I'm going to check names just by typing BOBB. I don't have to type the whole thing. It's going to find Bobby. Every time I see Bobby in these labs, I can't help but thinking of Bobby from King of the Hill. I don't know if anybody will ever watch King of the Hill, but that's who I picture Bobby is. That's who I picture the user Bobby is in these labs. Bobby from King of the Hill. Anyway, so now we can view effective access there. Basically, oh no, I just added him. That's fine. We could view effective access, and we can see that Bobby here has full control. So here's the effective access, and we gave him access to everything. So, well, I disagree with this. I don't think the lab wanted us to give him full control, but we did give him full control. So this would be correct in my lab, but fine. Okay, for this one, we would say no. I basically gave Bobby straight privileges across the board, and you can see that right here at the full control. All right, at the interface, include group membership, select add names. All right, let's see. In the interface, at include group membership, select add items. Include group membership, okay. Add items. Here we can do administrators. Just gonna do admin, check names, administrators, pops up. Hit OK, view effective access again. Administrators. Assuming this group membership, does Bobby have full control access? Yes. Now, ideally, basically what we've done now is add Bobby to the administrator group or simulate, in this instance, we can basically for each file or folder, we can state, okay, provide Bobby with privileges as if Bobby was part of this administrator group. Now, I don't recommend setting up your file system to do it this way. It's very easy to get confused and it's very easy to lose settings. I would rather, it's much easier to just assign group privileges and do like role-based access control, which Windows Active Directory is kind of designed for. That's much easier than trying to do it at the file and folder level. But you can, in certain circumstances, do it this way. Ideally, what we've done, what it's trying to tell us to do here is to provide access to the file to Bobby as if he was a member of the administrator group. Don't recommend doing that manually for each file and folder. Okay, so we can cancel out of this. And then let's go back to PowerShell. And we're going to run this little command. I'm just going to type that in for brevity's sake. basically this is the get ACL or get ACL. We're getting the access control list for this folder. Okay, and we're outputting that into c.permissions.text. So let's go ahead and first off, we'll score that because we did make it. Let's go ahead and find that. We have c permissions.text, and I can find that. And here we can see our permissions for the folders, or for that, yeah, for the folder. No, the file, for file a.txt. We can see administrator, allow full control, etc., etc., etc. So, excellent. We've done that correctly. All right, great. Any questions so far? And this is a lot of different steps for basic commands, but you guys are doing great. Okay. All right, so now we go back to Server Manager. We go Tools, Group Policy Management. As soon as that loads up, we'll be able to do this. I think it loaded up here. All right, now we're going to select Domain Controllers. The Domain Controllers Organizational Unit, which is going to be over here. We're going to right-click. We're going to select Create a GPO in this domain and link it here. We're going to name that as Audit Policy. So basically, we're creating a group policy object called Audit Policy. Now we're going to edit that group policy object. And this is where we can configure certain settings as a group policy object within this device here. Okay. And we can apply this to different groups. We can apply this to different machines. We can do anything like that. So in Group Policy Management Editor Console, we're going to expand these different carets here. Okay, we're going to start with computer configuration, then policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies. These are all in alphabetical order, or they should be most of the time. Local policies, sometimes they're not. These are grouped by like settings, and then they're, well, this one isn't done by alphabetical order. A lot of times they are. Local policies, security options. Okay, now we select security options. That's this step right there. We're going to select audit, force audit policy subcategory settings. So these are in the settings. The policy settings are in alphabetical order. Audit, force audit policy subcategory settings. It's not defined, so we're going to double click it. We're going to hit define and enable. Okay. So by default, it's not defined, which means it's not going to be on, of course. So to turn it on, we have to check define and click enabled, the enabled bubble there. So we hit OK, and now you see the policy setting is shown as enabled here. All right, then in Group Policy Management Editor, we're going to expand computer configuration, policies. So we're minimize security settings. We're going to go to computer configuration, policies, security settings, advanced audit policy settings. That's at the very bottom, advanced audit policy settings, audit policies, and then options or object access. All right. So here we have object access. That's all this step. We're going to double click audit file system. We're going to configure the following audit events for success and failure. So we're asking the system here, we're asking this Windows server to log successes and failures to our file system. So if there were access attempts and they failed, we would record that. If they were successful, we'd record that too. So we're good. We're going to close that interface. And then we're going to go back to PowerShell. And we're going to force these updates. The way we can force these updates are GP update space/force. I definitely recommend remembering this command. You'll have it tested on the exam, and it's a useful command to know. If you make any changes to group policy editor, you would need to run this GP update force to force those updates through. Now, ideally, you'd have a change management system, and you wouldn't just be making these configuration changes without having somebody else look at them also. Okay. Now what we can do is we can generate our audit policies and then output those in an HTML file. It's going to say it's generating a report. Go back to our file explorer, and then we see our audit file here. I'm going to open that up. It comes out as an HTML file. So you're going to put up in Explorer or in Firefox or whatnot. And here you see all the audit policies here. And we can click score. It's going to check that we did this correctly, and we did as well. So fantastic. So in that way, we're generating audit policy, and we're not doing too many settings on it, but we are generating an audit policy. We're telling the system which auditable events or which events to start recording. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our Data 1 folder. We're going to right-click this, hit Properties. All right, we're going to go to Security, Advanced button. Okay, in the Auditing tab, we're going to select Continue. And then we're going to add an audit policy here, or an audit setting. Now we got to select a principal. Okay, select who this applies to. We're going to do auth, type AUTH, check names. We're going to get 2 possible results. I'm going to hit authenticated users. So when authenticated users attempt to access this folder, we're going to generate an auditable event, essentially. Let's see, we're going to apply to this folder, subfolders, and files. Type of audit, add all from the pull down menu. All, so failures and successes. We're going to say basic permissions. We're going to select all of these. So if you select full control, it selects everything. And then we should be fine. Yeah, that's fine. All, this folder, subfolders, full control, hit OK. Now what we can do, we hit apply and OK. You got to hit apply and OK. Then we can open the text file here, file A. We could type in something. Blue elephants are the best types of elephants. It wants us to put in today's date. I think it's a little boring. I'm going to save that and close. You can type in whatever you want here. Okay. Then from Server Manager here, we're going to select Tools and Event Viewer. Okay. Tools and Event Viewer. And basically, we can see this event now. Since we told the system to log this event, we can now see it in our Event Viewer. So we're going to go to Windows Logs on the left here. Okay. Expand that out. We should see an event at the top of the list here. Security, we select that, and then here we go. Expand this out. We should see something at the very top of the list. An attempt was made to access this object. Now, right here, we see that this was in this middle pane. It's a little difficult to see unless you have a big monitor. Audit success on this computer. This event or this file was was accessed object name data1. That's the folder. The object type was a file through the file explorer. So this was, we accessed this correctly. So basically, we opened the file and the auditable event showed that we did that. And that's exactly what it read. An attempt was made to access this object. Confirm the file access audit log. Entry exists for event ID 4663. And we see that right here. Was the event logged as a success or a failure? This was a success. Audit success. So great. So now we're basically auditing, or we're recording attempts to access this folder. This could be very useful. Say you have a folder where you have secure files. You want to track who accessed these files, when it's being accessed. And you can do this, since we've turned on this auditable event for this whole folder, we can determine who attempts to access these files, if there's any successes or deny or failures. And then when these users are trying to access these files and folders. So that's very useful from a audit or a non-repudiation standpoint. Remember, non-repudiation is basically proving that a user did something, or refuting or denying the ability for the user to claim they didn't do something, which I think is a very confusing way of saying it. Non-repudiation by itself has a double negative. So you're basically proving a user did something through audit logs. It's a good way of explaining non-repudiation. All right, let's try these comprehensive questions. If you want to try and answer these questions, just type 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat for those watchers on YouTube and Discord. All right, which of the following best describes a reason to audit or display running processes on the system or on the server? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, or 4, discover who's logged in the system. Make sure the system is up to date. Ensure users are running work-related processes and not games, or check for higher resource utilization. Could indicate security, performance, reliability issues. So I'm seeing fours. Okay, that's very good. We're checking those processes to see any unusual parameters, unusual memory usage. If we see any IDs, process IDs, or any processes that we don't recognize, that's a good way to detect malware. I mean, more advanced malware is going to be able to hide itself. Very good. So if you type 4, great job, you got it right. All right, which of the following best describes why it's useful to audit effective permissions? So users can verify their permissions are set correctly, to display user share permissions on the file, to see what effect placing user in a different group will have on the access, or to view a history of users' access to the resource. Why do we want to audit effective permissions? So what does that mean, audit effective permissions? So I'm going to say I'm seeing some 2s. I'm seeing some 4s. Okay, so it's not 4. And this is a little confusing the way it's seen. And it's not going to be 2. Okay? So basically, audit effective permissions. We're basically looking at what permissions are assigned to a user. The way they really shouldn't use the term audit here. I should say to review effective permissions. I think that'd be a lot better right now, because we're talking about auditing in a different sense, and then they use the term audit here. We're basically reviewing permissions here. We're reviewing the types of permissions that a user has. So to see what effect placing a user in a different group will have on their access to the resource, that's the most correct answer. I don't really like this question. It's pretty confusing. So let's drive on. All right, which of the following best describes why auditing for failed access attempts to folders and files is a good security practice? Okay. 1, 2, 3, or 4 here. See which processes users are attempting to run. to see which users are accessing folders on a daily basis, to see which users are viewing folders and the contents, or to see which users are trying to access resources, indicating either permission, configuration, or unauthorized users. Now I'm seeing some 4s here. Okay, and that's right. Yeah, basically by reviewing or auditing the failed attempts, we're seeing who's trying to access the resource and who's unsuccessful. So if we only audited the successes, we'd only see when the authorized users are able to access the file successfully. We wouldn't see any unauthorized attempts, which might indicate a potential attack. Maybe a hacker has placed themselves on our network somewhere and they're trying to access a certain file or folder. So very good. Now, if you type 4, absolutely got it right. All right, fantastic. Great job today. I hope that was very helpful. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Fantastic job.